Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. In today's edition of Transfer Plans, I shall of course have transfer plans, match analysis, specific player insights, and a game week review. It is coupled with, however, this time around, a chip strategy section as well, primarily fueled by my lack of enthusiasm surrounding the triple captaincy chip in particular, and even the assistant manager chip are slightly cooled on given how certain results went this weekend and just the landscape of playing the chip as well, which we'll get into. Now, this video is being recorded during the second half of the Aston Villa West Ham game, so there'll be no reference to that and no update on the screen as a result of that. I am aware that it is 1-0 to Aston Villa, and they had a relatively strong showing in the first half. As you can see, quite a good game week, a very healthy sized green arrow, and now just looking to kick on. If you have not subscribed around here, then I'd be greatly appreciative if you do so, especially if you're one of the thousands that watch regularly and have not clicked the button. 6,500 subscribers is the aim after this video, as is 450 likes, and you guys have been so great on that front, so I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the support in general. But with nothing else needing to be said, let's hop into it. We will switch things up and leave the game week review to the end and start with Jordan Pickford as such. Now, when I was making the slides for this video, I actually went and wrote 8 points on Jordan Pickford, only to later realize that I'd written 8 points and he'd only been rewarded with 5. Personally, for me, it's an assist, but if we don't get it, then it is what it is. No issues. It happens sometimes. I mean, the way I see it is he kicks the ball down the field. Veltman, through a series of events, ends up handballing it without any other touch beforehand. You could argue that potentially Beto touches it beforehand, in which case I think he should get the assist. But to have no assist, I don't really understand. But regardless, it is what it is, and that's not an issue. He did, however, manage to keep a clean sheet away at Brighton. We discussed how Brighton aren't as good against these type of sides as maybe you would expect them to be, given the quality that they boast. And as such, to get a 5-pointer from Pickford honestly feels like a haul, especially because Sanchez has been not so good in recent weeks, and the drop-off in a relative sense from going from Sells to Sanchez, and especially the form that Sells was in. So with the double coming up, I'm really happy with him, especially considering all my other options, apart from Kepa, ended up not keeping a clean sheet. So yeah, delighted with the Pickford selection, and hopefully it continues. In terms of the name, I think I'm just not going to give it one. I don't like any of them. I like Pickpoint to an extent, but it just doesn't hit the same. So I think I'm just going to applaud him when he gets the points, but not necessarily giving him a name. One thing I forgot to add about the Pickford selection as well is in terms of Everton against Brighton didn't really have too many big opportunities as well. So that bodes well for Everton's defence down the line. I imagine more sides will have more shots on target than the one that Brighton did, and as such, then he can start to claw into that very realistic and high ceiling that he has on offer. Moving on to the defence, we will start with Lewis Hall. I discussed the possibility that Southampton could always score. I don't think Newcastle are the most secure defence in the league. Somewhat lucky to get some of the clean sheets I have had this season. In fact, quite lucky from Lewis Hall. And as such, Southampton scored pretty early on, and I was like, all right, fair enough. Maybe I should have started Robinson, but I think it was difficult to bench him for Southampton away when you've also got the attacking returns on offer. And Gabriel also had a few big chances, so quite fortunate to get the clean sheet there, but he also gets 1 bonus point as well, just away from the second bonus point due to 1 being lost in the bonus point system around like the 95th minute. He goes to 27, Rye stays on 28, which means that Rye gets a 9-pointer, including the saves, and Gabriel remains on a 7-pointer. But very happy with my decision to keep him, considering that I definitely was toying with the idea for a little bit of selling him, but considering after City, they've got West Ham and Leicester, it's looking like a good decision to keep. And my favourite decision, well, in the defence at least, was to buy Ibrahima Konate. I mean, it started so well, right, with the assist to Szoboszlai, and I was like, okay, I probably covered whatever Trent is going to do in this game at least. And then Trent gets the assist, and then he was ahead of him in the bonus point system. Then Konate overtook him, and then they conceded. So it finished 5-5. But the fact that he outscores Alisson and Van Dijk, both of whom were more expensive and significantly more so in regards to Van Dijk, feels really good. I've at least got a safety net if any of them, get some bonus or some save points or an assist down the line, or even a goal. It's certainly damage limitation. And considering the double that Liverpool have, and some of you may have seen my tweet, I was being deadly serious, by the way. Whether you believe me or not, I genuinely don't tweet bait, and I do think it's absolutely fine to sell Trent in many cases. Now, in the case where you have a wonderful squad structure, the squad's really balanced, you plan really well, then yeah, of course, I wouldn't be selling him, and that's not what the tweet was addressing. Maybe I could have used the phrase, I could have phrased it slightly better instead of saying many and being a bit more specific. But yeah, regardless, we'll come on to that in everything you need to know, I'm sure. Yeah, really happy with Konate. And one thing about him is it wasn't just the assist that he got. He played one long ball into Salah, which Salah could have finished on another day, and that could have been an assist. And just in general, he's playing a lot of breaking line passes, being able to step like from that right centre back role when Liverpool were building with a 3 into the more advanced spaces and then play passes from there. So you never know. You might get another assist from him in the following game weeks. And then Wolves at home, he's definitely got good prospects given Wolves' inability to deal with set pieces as well as they would have liked this season. So yeah, delighted with that selection, and he's facilitated a lot going forward, including Philip Foden staying in my side and returning, not just with a return, but a goal. No bonus. I looked at it during the game and he was on -4 bonus points, and I was like, he really hasn't done anything that bad. He hasn't missed any big chances, so why he was that low, I'm not so sure. And that probably made sure that he didn't get any bonus. I think he finished on about 21 and he get to like 27 to get to, but so be it. Is what it is. Still delighted from an FPL perspective purely to get a return from him. We'll speak about him in the match analysis section, but I certainly liked what I saw. And like I said, having Konate in the side and choosing him over the likes of Trent and Van Dijk allowed me to keep him. And as you will see in transfer plans, it allows me to keep him and also get Brian Mbeumo. Moving on to Gordon, I'm happy to take a 5-pointer. I even said during the game when it was like 2-1, I was like, oh, if Gordon gets an assist, I'll be more than happy with that. And he delivers. Palmer 2-pointer. In hindsight, should I have benched him? I still think probably not. I think it was fine to play him, especially given the way we started in the game, which again, we'll come on to in the match analysis section. Salah had a really, really, really lively start to the game and honestly could have hauled within like the first 15, 20 minutes. Just maybe the final action not as clean as he would like or as clean as it has been this season. Obviously, we'll talk about the triple captaincy at the end. One thing I would say, though, is he's scored once in the last 6 game weeks. Well, that's not so good, especially when you've considered the fixtures that they had. And I mean that with the greatest respect. 1 in 6 isn't the best. And so we'll come on to that in the triple captaincy section. But it's just planting the seed and at least getting you to consider potentially avoiding it, because I am certainly considering doing that. But yeah, overall, the midfield does pretty well. In general, if you look at the team, everyone kind of just chips in 5-pointers, 7-pointers, and then 2-pointers, as you'll see with Wissa. Isak obviously hurt my rank given he was over 100% EO, which makes sense given he's captained away to Southampton. And if you went there, by the way, well done, because 5-point swing against Salah, I think is very, very healthy. And it's pretty much across the entire field, you're going to get that 5+ points. So I commend that. The one person who was at a fairly low EO who absolutely did the business for me was my transfer in, Mr. Cody Gakpo. Now, you will see that the vice captaincy is actually on him. And Friday night, I just toyed with the idea of going against Salah. And then Saturday morning, I was like, oh, maybe I could captain Cody Gakpo. Now, I probably should have at least allowed myself to give it some more thought, but I quickly eradicated the idea from my mind after about 15 seconds, mainly because I had to host a space thereafter. And if you haven't checked that out, by the way, I host the Fantasy Football Hub Spaces on X an hour before every deadline for an hour, and you can come on and get your questions answered. It's like a voice chat. It's like a YouTube stream, but only audio. It is really cool. I think they've done a wonderful job with the platform X in that sense. So, you know, if you ever want to get your questions answered, just request. And normally there's a bit of a wait, but I will get you on at some point, or at least I shall do my best to get you on. And yeah, he pops up with a 16-pointer. And what I really liked about it is it very much followed the analysis that we had on him. It wasn't just the fact that he scored or he returned. It was the way in which he returned. We spoke about his crosses. We spoke about his headers. We spoke about ball striking as well, which really didn't come into account, but also just the fact that he occupies really good positions and the volume in which he does that. And you saw him popping up in that number 9 position for his first goal. And we'll speak about why he was there in the first place in the rotations with Diaz in the match analysis. And I actually think that's very healthy for his expected minutes compared to Diaz's in those tougher games, especially when the game's a little bit close. So we'll talk about that then. Isak gets a 13-pointer. There's no real surprise there, right? I mean, in unbelievable form. And had he not blanked it, or had he scored against Bournemouth, he'd be really gunning for Jamie Vardy's record. So, yeah, I mean, he seems like a bit of a season keep. And even in like 29, I don't really have any intention of selling him. So, yeah, that's all good. Wissa, we'll speak about again in match analysis. I should have put 2 points there. I apologize. That's the one thing I didn't change. I apologize. He looked really busy in the game, and I think that was really good. It's very lively. And on another day, maybe he returns. I mean, there was one good save from Henderson in the first half, and in the second half, just by millimeters, misses the cross that was put into him, and he probably would have scored the header, given he was about 6 yards out, given the dimensions of the box. But yeah, very happy to own him, and obviously with Spurs not being in the best of form, there's certainly an opportunity for him to cash in at home to Spurs in the next game week. I benched Rodgers. Like I said, in hindsight, maybe I could have played him, especially after the analysis following the Ananya injury, where you expect him to play through the middle again. So far, so lucky, so good. He's got through the first half with a blank for myself. We'll see obviously what unfolds. But if he does return, I wouldn't be surprised if I actually ended up making a mistake by not playing him ahead of potentially Wissa or even Palmer. One of the two, probably Wissa. But I will review that in due course once the game has finished and kind of just checking with myself to see if I made a mistake. However, he is actually on the chopping block in transfer plans, as you will see. So that's a wrap-up of the team. Like I said, very healthy position to be in, up to 18k. When it's a 5-figure rank and it starts with a 1, it's always good to look at, I guess. And yeah, just looking to kick on. And with all chips in the bank, it should be a very interesting end to the season, second half. For those in our community, these are the perks on offer, and we've had a multitude of success stories since we started about a month ago. Someone joined about 1.3 million and now finds himself well within the top 250k. Someone joined around 300k and finds himself well inside the top 100k. And we've got two people inside the top 50 in the world, and that's not to mention a multitude of other successes, including many people buying Cody Gakpo this week and winning the captaincy shout not so long ago. So if you would like to get in on any of that, then of course you can. You can join via the link in the description or even the 1-hour Q&A diamond calls, which have been going down really well as of late. And of course, the FPL chat and the football analysis. In addition, I would love to see you there. And like I've said a few times, I think there's minimum downside and maximum upside to this opportunity. And if you don't like it, by all means, cancel after a month. Like I said, would love to have you, and I hope to see you there. It was so impressive from Liverpool this time around. I mean, it has been for many games this season, but I would argue that this was their most dominant. And honestly, I'm not sure if I've watched a more dominant display this season, with all due respect to Ipswich. There are so many things to talk about and so many impressive things. We will start with the counter-pressing, because that was my favourite aspect of their performance. Every time they lost the ball, especially in the middle, they would jump. And it wouldn't just be that one that jumped. I remember at times I saw Gravenberch, McAllister, and one of the just jumped the millisecond they lost the ball onto the player, and then all of those three helped to retrieve it back, and they recycle and go again. And they did that so many times. Now, I heard the commentator say that they actually ended up running less than Ipswich in the game, and that was probably because they covered those short distances so quickly that when they lost the ball, and once they got it, they could recycle and then just let the ball do the work for them. Because as Guardiola speaks about, you really want the ball to do the work for you. Obviously, Johan Cruyff spoke about something similar as well. So yeah, so impressive in that regard. And I mean, playing against that must be really tough. And when you do play against that, one of your outs is meant to be to go long, because if you can't play through them, you just play in behind them with just one long ball, and it's a really good pressure release. However, one issue with going long against Liverpool is that you have to deal with Konate and Van Dijk, and as Liam Delap found, how that's very difficult, even when you are of the stature and have the physical profile that Liam Delap has, never mind his quality, right? And the other thing is, even if they went long and he managed to win the ball, because Philogene was so deep, protecting that space that Trent was occupying as well on that wide Liverpool right zone, and Hutchinson couldn't get too close to him as well. Even if he won the header, there was no one to latch onto the second ball and then go from there. So the amount of threat that they posed Liverpool was very minimal. And if there was ever a game for a clean sheet, they certainly deserve one here. So if you had double Liverpool defense, it was rough. You certainly deserved it based on the performance. But yeah, that was top. One thing that was pretty interesting from Liverpool is the difference in breaking down low blocks. You've seen a lot of 3-2-5 as of late. Probably less this season, but you've seen a lot of 3-2-5 in the Premier League for a few years now. But it was very much a 3-4-3, especially in the first half. You had Robertson left centre-back, Van Dijk central centre-back, Konate right centre-back, and often Konate would step into the space because, like I said, Philogene was a lot deeper. The space wasn't protected, and then he would play those breaking line passes. Very effective. You had McAllister and Gravenberch in the middle, both very competent at receiving in those small spaces on the half turn. And even, I'd say McAllister specifically, you get him a little bit more advanced and you want him to play a eye of the needle type of pass. Certainly can do so, and he's very comfortable, again, receiving in those small spaces, in those more advanced pockets. So that's great in terms of that dynamic. Trent was quite wide, as was Gakpo for the start in the first half when they had Ipswich pinned, and then a front three of Szoboszlai, Diaz, and Salah. But I would say it was certainly more right-hand side orientated. And I think in general, Liverpool are a bit more, they definitely are more orientated to that right-hand side in build-up and even in those more advanced spaces. I remember against Man United, and I was like, oh, maybe they could use the left a little bit more, and then you switch as a play to create isolated situations for their player instead of having the pitch packed on that side. But honestly, knows a lot more than me. So, but just an idea, and just in general, like if you do watch them, they've got a lot more through that right hand side, and they're probably more dangerous there as well, right? Like, makes sense, and even Szoboszlai. But when they did have Ipswich pinned, I didn't actually think they were so dangerous when they had Diaz at 9. I didn't think he really managed to get into the game. You can't really put it into him in those areas because he's not super strong. He's not someone who's going to take the ball into him and you can work off him like that. And then the spaces between the lines are so reduced that even dropping in is quite difficult because, like I said, there's little space. So what often happened in the second half of the first half was these rotations with Gakpo. He would come to these wider left zones in the left half space, and Gakpo would occupy the number 9 like zones. And look, he scores off it, right? Like he's in the right place at the right time. He even does that for the second goal. Look where he pops up. That's the left winger. And I thought that dynamic worked well to kind of solve their issue a little bit that they had against this deeper block. I do think against deeper blocks going forward that you can't always do this. Like this isn't always going to work. Maybe like having a little bit of a different solution in terms of personnel to Diaz wouldn't be such a bad idea. Just a theory. And lastly, to finish off, I thought Szoboszlai was brilliant. That's kind of just been the norm as of late. I mean, the skill set is vast and very useful. I mean, the carrying, the ball striking, the counter pressing, really what you need on the slot side, right? So very, very, very good. I think one thing I've seen with them is that they're never going to press you so intensely in terms of their high press. Like you look at Bournemouth and they will go man to man and they will jump and they will go all the way. Whereas Liverpool are a little bit more happy for the centre backs to have the ball in a slightly slower paced situation within the game and the goalkeeper as well. So I don't think you're going to get as many goals from super high turnovers. I think if you're going to do that, it's more going to be the second wave of the press on the assumption Liverpool are building from the back. So yeah, like I said, really dominant display from Liverpool. That's not to take away from Ipswich. They've got a lot of good players. They've got a good coach, but for this particular game, Liverpool really didn't get out of second gear. And like I said, super impressive. I realised I didn't speak about Salah or Trent, so I probably should. In the first half, he didn't have too many threatening actions, Trent. Not as many as I would like as an owner of a £7.3 million asset, which, like I said, we'll touch on in everything you need to know. And in the second half, even then, I would say it was like a 10-minute spell where he looked particularly dangerous. So obviously he gets the assist. He had this shot from outside the box, which I honestly thought smashed the top corner. That went very close, and it was a really good shot. And then obviously he hits the bar as well. What I would say, and I mean this with the greatest respect to Ipswich, is that the volume of opportunities he had wasn't so high, and it was against the side that there's a big gap in quality. So when you look at someone like Bournemouth, right, he's going to have Semenyo down that flank. So obviously he's going to have to deal with the overall transitional threat of Bournemouth in general, but he's also going to have to deal with Semenyo down that flank, and Semenyo will probably have him pinned deeper just as a result of that. So he probably won't get into those positions as much, and he didn't do it too much against Ipswich anyway. And then Wolves, yeah, he'll definitely get forward a little bit more, but you still got to account for Matthias Cunha, right? Big deal. And Everton away, yeah, he probably should get advanced more often. But in the short term, Bournemouth, I don't think it's going to be particularly easy. So that's just something to take into account. Salah was really lively for that first 15, 20 minutes. Looked like he was just going to score or return. And the goal was wonderfully well taken. I thought it was a top finish, probably a little bit of an underrated one because we're kind of used to it with him and maybe suffers a little bit from aesthetic bias. In fact, he definitely does. But yeah, overall, just very solid. I mean, has he had better performances? Yeah, but has he had worse ones? Yeah, as well. Like I said, Liverpool didn't really get out of second gear, so he didn't really need to take it to that other level. But in general, very good. Probably a little bit wider than you want after the first 20 minutes, but I guess that's going to happen with the way that they play. And it doesn't make too much of a difference to his output because he is so good and he still has those instances, gets into zones and half spaces more than enough. As mentioned last week, I tailored this match analysis more specifically to FPL, so it's better for you guys. That's why I included, for example, the Trent and Salah section at the end, and that's why I've got more discussion about Phil Foden than the game probably would have warranted on this slide. We'll start with, however, how we had them on the ropes. We really did. We're 1-0 up. Obviously, the new centre-back had a really rough start to the game. You've got a feel for the guy, right? Doesn't know the language, 20 years old, big price tag, biggest league in the world, baptism of fire considering the opposition that he faces, the occasion, City on in particularly good form. After he made the mistake, no one really went to him, put an arm around him and said, you know what, it's okay, things happen, that's football, that's life, get on with it, we're all good and we're here to support you. I mean, he had such a tough situation to be put in, so I felt very, very bad for him. But from a competitive standpoint, they were there and he was there to be taken, especially when he was on a yellow card after he fouled Palmer. And we just let him off. It just lacked intensity, I thought. They were there for the kill and we didn't take it. And honestly, we were deservedly punished. And we've done this so many times throughout the last one, getting a little bit frustrating from a Chelsea standpoint. I mean, initially that threat of our transitions, it was there. We knew it was going to be there. Probably should have extended for a longer period of time, but City started to get a little bit more control of the game around the 25th minute, and it certainly simmered. Like I said, I thought it was too passive of an approach. I don't mind that like the press wasn't particularly aggressive. I actually think it's a good thing not to press City high with their particular selection of personnel this time around, just because I think they would have been able to cut through us. And you obviously had Marmoush and Haaland, so if they play through us and then they want to go longer or they want to go in behind, then we got problems because there's two runners as opposed to the usual one. And Foden was playing in the middle, so you always had that release on as opposed to Bernardo, who was playing in the middle as well. It was almost like a diamond at times in midfield, but he was dropping in a lot deeper to help with build-up. Talking about build-up, they don't have any left-footers, at least in build-up, aside from Bernardo Silva. He dropped deep quite a bit, but it was more of a floating role, and as such, you don't really have someone on the left-hand side that's left-footed because Guardiola's always like higher and wider. His fullback usage was actually a more traditional fullback usage, I thought. Not so much inverting, but overlapping and allowing those advancements into the final zones, almost like it was maybe 8 years ago as well. But yeah, I think personally, their build-up patterns were slightly suboptimal as a result of not having a left-footed centre-back. Obviously, he has so many injuries, right? Like, what's he meant to do? I'm not criticizing him in any sense. And plus, he's Pep Guardiola. He knows a lot more than me, but it's just an observation that when you are playing against them, I actually don't think a mid-block is such a bad idea if they don't have that left-footed centre-back in there, even with Bernardo dropping deeper. Going long into Haaland was a wonderful solution. I think a lot of people have been crying out for it for a long period of time now. They do it twice, and they score both times, so good on them. Well, they did it more times, but twice they did it, and twice they scored. It makes sense, right? I mean, huge physical presence, can take the ball into him. And you know what? I actually think he, similar to Salah suffers from aesthetic bias a little bit, but he's actually very, very competent and clean on the ball when linking. Like you saw that, for example, for the Foden pass. He's done that at times throughout the season as well, and he doesn't get the credit for it because maybe he looks a little bit more clumpy given the size of his body and just the way it moves. But he's actually very effective there. So going long to him, I think it's something we'll probably see more often now, especially considering the success it's had. There's no mention of Marmoush here, but brilliant debut. I mean, it's very clear to see the quality on show. Likewise, I thought Phil Foden was actually really good from an FPL standpoint. I thought Marmoush was better in terms of the footballing aspect, but personally, I thought what we saw from Phil Foden, not just in terms of FPL, obviously in terms of football as well, was actually very solid. Why? Well, the amount of runs this guy made in the game into these dangerous zones, well, it was a high volume, right? And Jude Bellingham had an interview recently where he spoke about that. He was like, people don't really notice that I make 20 runs into the box compared to other people who make 5. And when I get my goal, they say it's lucky. It's not. I just make more runs, so my probability increases. Foden made so many of those runs. And yeah, sure, he wasn't found for any of them, but he gets his reward for going and going and going in the 87th minute. But it's his presence within the game that I like. Now, I spoke about this a little bit in terms of the Aston Villa game and the Leicester game as well, before we kind of went on this run. But he seemed so sharp, and he was present with his actions, and he was there, and they had a snap about it. And I really like that when a player's completely involved in the game. Sometimes other players float in and out, but he doesn't. So he's always there, he's always alive, and thus the opportunities, they can come to him at a higher frequency as such. So for me, I'm really not considering selling him, and I thought as such it was a pretty good performance from him, and in general, operating in those central zones, that's where we would like Phil Foden as an owner. There are other things to speak about. For example, we didn't have Romeo Lavia, so it means that we have less dueling capacity, and as such, when we play through us, it's easier for them to do that. There's obviously the Sanchez mistake. They don't have huge implications in FPL. We know that Chelsea have a somewhat error-prone defense, and we know that Sanchez has obviously got those errors in him. I think he's got the most in the league this season now. So that's something we just have to identify with the Chelsea defense. And the other thing is, like Maresca said, we're so young. We lack maturity to an extent as a side, and as such, we are throwing games away when we are on top as such, and we've seen that for a while now. So all things to consider when having assets playing against a Chelsea defense. Yeah, we're a good team, but we're not a great team, and we're a decent defense, but we're not a great defense. Now, it's not overly relevant from FPL, so I won't spend too much time on it, but the Crystal Palace versus Brentford first half, which was a 0-0, was actually one of my favorite 0-0 halves of the season because I just loved the Brentford performance. I just wanted to give them some prop. I mean, the approach, the intensity, the press, Thomas Frank, I just loved a lot of it. I thought it was great, and it was really good viewing, so I just wanted to give them some prop. Damsgaard with another very good performance in that first half in particular, and yeah, I just liked a lot about it, so I just wanted to talk about it. Moving on to the actual game, I thought Palace maybe just missed a slight trick with his solution, particularly regarding Sarr. I thought Eze was probably the most threatening player in this game, and it made sense, right? Against these aggressive sides, having someone who can come a little bit deeper, receive, and then function in small spaces and carry and just do a variety of things works well. And you almost need that against these more aggressive sides. Sarr against Chelsea was dropping deeper and functioning not solely as a runner, but also a carrier and someone who's come to receive. And given they play with a pivot and two in the middle, I think at times against Brentford, it's very, very, very useful to have more numbers in there that can operate and complete that function. Without that, I thought it was difficult for them to connect into Mateta. And the wing-backs didn't really have much today either, especially because the game wasn't played. The pitch wasn't really utilized in such a wide manner. Like you'll see that, for example, with an older version of City, when they have someone pinned in the block and it's deep and they use 3-2-5, it's a really wide pitch. But I didn't really think that Munoz and Mitchell had too much today in that sense, just given how the game unfolded and how the two sides interact with each other, given the personnel, system, selections, etc. Right? So I thought that was maybe a trick they missed. And I say, let's draw on the Callum Hudson-Odoi example, because of what I spoke about with Eze. On Friday, we spoke about how it's not so good for Wood because he's losing a player who not only he has a great relationship with, but someone who can deal with the aggressive nature of Bournemouth. You can put the ball into him in these advanced pockets and he'll be able to retain it. He'll be able to function competently, very competently in these small spaces, but he's still a threat on transition. And like I said, has a good relationship with Wood, and he can still function as a runner to an extent, right? So losing that wasn't particularly helpful. Brentford and Bournemouth's approaches are not light years apart, and as such, I thought Sarr tweaking the role for Sarr would have been a better practice and allowed Palace to connect better into their front three, into Mateta, and made him more of a threat from there. But it is what it is. Moving on to something more specific for FPL, Wilson and Brian Mbeumo, they are genuinely, that's how I describe them, and I thought of them in the game. They're busy bees, and obviously bees as well, so it works. They're just so involved, and they're so lively, and they're so sharp, and they're always on it. And as such, and then you combine the quality, like the 10 quality on top of that, and their floors over a medium span length of fixtures are so high as a result. Because how are you meant to stop them? When they're performing at that level and that intensity, that sharpness and that presence on such a consistent basis, it's just going to be really difficult to stop them scoring between the pair or assisting between the pair over a medium length span, right? So if you haven't got those assets, especially with a fixture run coming up, I would certainly consider it. West Ham away can be interpreted slightly differently. I just think West Ham away can be awkward for reasons I will discuss, and that's to do with Graham Potter and the fact that he's not like a lot of the managers in the league currently. He's far more adaptable. He's actually willing to let the opponent be the protagonist of sorts, and he will react to you. And as such, I think that game could be a little bit more awkward and isn't quite the slam dunk that it maybe presents itself to be. Spurs, it should be really good for these two. You just never know with them. Like I never know what Spurs I'm going to get. So even though I'm slightly cautious, I'm not going to say these fixtures are just unbelievable. Have done maybe last week. Little bit down on them, knowing what Spurs and West Ham can do on the day. But still, for these two in particular, it should be really good. And again, they look lively and they could have had some more returns today. Some good luck for Mbeumo owners, given he misses the penalty with the encroachment. But sometimes you need that, and you always deserve it when you get it, in my opinion. Bournemouth Forest. Now, the other three games I watched in its entirety. I haven't done that for Bournemouth Forest, so not as much analysis here. I said for a while that I think Forest lack a 6, like a specific type of number 6 profile. I mean, Caicedo would be great, but wouldn't Caicedo be great for every team? I think just having that destroyer type, he doesn't even need to be that good in build-up because of how good Elliot Anderson is, but I think just having a destroyer type and someone who's very good at covering large spaces would be so helpful for them, especially just it would allow you to leverage Elliot Anderson's quality even more, I think, and indirectly impact the side in such a positive way. Even when, for example, when Aina jumps and goes forward and then you have this large space to protect, having him in there would be so useful. I think, for example, the first goal could potentially have been avoided if that was the case, albeit there was a bit of a misunderstanding between Aina and Jota Silva. Apart from that, I'm not going to read into this Forest game too much. Like I said, I think not having Callum Hudson-Odoi was a big deal. They're not a side that's so bad that they're meant to be losing this game 5-0. Just had a bad day. Sells made a mistake. Murillo and Milenkovic didn't have their best day. It happens. They've had a good season. You have an off day, no problem. Bournemouth, on the other hand, I think we can definitely read into what we've seen with them, not just in this game, but recently. And against these bigger sides, they're so competent because of the physical profiles they have, because of the aggressive approach from Iraola. And as such, I would interpret their fixture slightly differently as well. Yeah, sure, they can blow away, quote-unquote, the smaller teams. But when those teams set up in that manner, they don't really have a bunch of low block destroyers. So there's something to consider. But in these games where They'll have more transitions in nature where the game will be a bit more physical. I think it is so difficult to compete with them. And honestly, Bournemouth away, as I expressed in the next slide, is objectively one of the hardest fixtures you can have this season. I mean, only 2 people have beat them there, Chelsea and Brighton. Brighton, well, I'd say maybe it was a fair result, but Bournemouth certainly, you could argue, deserved a point. And they were better than us, right? We might have beat them 1-0, but they missed a penalty. At least their first half performance was way better than us. And if it wasn't for Sancho, we were in big trouble that day. So, yeah, going away to Bournemouth, and they beat City, they beat Arsenal, they beat Forest, they beat Spurs, they beat so many big teams. You might laugh at Spurs, but still a big team with a lot of talent. And yeah, going there is really tough. So I wouldn't be looking at this as a fixture where Salah should do particularly well. I think this is one of the tough fixtures he could have. Slightly different transfer plan section. Normally it's just one big section, but here we have 2. I am still in favour of the transfer that I suggested for myself last week, which is Anthony Gordon to Brian Mbeumo. I don't actually think Gordon's fixtures are that bad, if at all. Fulham at home, City away, Forest at home, Liverpool away are the type of fixtures that Gordon would kind of just rise to the occasion. And especially if we do see the Forest decline that I spoke about, maybe this is the start, that's fine. And that's at home as well. And you could probably put a few past them if they're on a decline and they have something similar to Bournemouth. City, we've obviously seen very susceptible to those transitions. And I do not think Newcastle will do what Chelsea did. I don't think they'll take their foot off the gas. And if they have us, well, if they have them on the ropes, I think they'll go for the knockout. Liverpool's way is arguably the toughest game you can have this season. Maybe Arsenal way is tougher Arsenal way is tougher for an attacker, I would say. But nonetheless, I still think that's the type of game where Gordon could do well. He did well in the reverse fixture. Fulham at home, you could argue is the toughest of the lot. Far more difficult to interpret because I kind of don't know. Fulham are going to turn up on the day, but still, right? He's Gordon, he's at home, he's good. My issue is that he hasn't been hauling, and he doesn't look quite the same goal threat that he has maybe in the past and last season. And as such, like I've expressed with my reasons for selling Jackson and not really making that type of mistake again, I would like someone with a very realistic ability to hit a ceiling and that to have a high ceiling. And I wouldn't say at the moment Gordon fits into that second category. And as such, Brian Mbeumo comes into the side, right? I mean, if he returns once, obviously today he gets no bonus points and he scores, but usually he scores, he's in the bonus, and he's on set pieces, he's on penalties. He has so many routes to points in games and through the penalties and set pieces. He's just the most brilliant asset. And like I say here, you could honestly have made him in a lab. He's that perfect, that optimal. So he very likely comes into Gordon. There's not too much to say there. Apart from the fact that if I am to do that, I have no money, well, I have 0.2 million, I think, to use on the assistant manager chip, if I am not to use triple captain chip. So that we will come on to in the next slide. I forgot I have to talk about Transfer Plans 25. I am mindful of Gameweek 29, and I certainly will prepare for it. I have no intention of using my free hit when 4 teams are going to blank. Aston Villa play Liverpool, which means that I don't just have to worry about my Newcastle assets. Let's just assume they get through and them and Palace blank. I also have to worry about my Liverpool, but also I have to worry. I already said that. I also have to worry about Rodgers. And not having that player there, especially in a blank game week where you really need your squad to be there, is a bit of an issue. Selling him, especially at his price point, I think now I can sell him for 5.3. Clivert's like 5.7. Only 0.4 difference, where I will get Clivert in 25, not 24. He has Liverpool. Not a bad fixture, not the worst fixture in the world for him. It's not great, right? It's Liverpool. Oh, and by the way, we're going to talk about some stuff and everything you need to know. But just because something is relatively worse doesn't mean it's bad. So like I'll use the Foden fixtures as an example. Just because Chelsea away is relatively worse than Ipswich, or Chelsea at home is relatively worse than Ipswich away, that doesn't mean it's a bad fixture, right? It just means it's worse. So it could operate here on the scale as opposed to here, right? You can have good and great as opposed to just always having bad and good fixtures. Just something to consider. And we'll talk about that a bit more and everything you need to know, as we will with decision making, because I had a bit of a cognition on Friday and I think it's important we discuss it. Anyway, going back to this, yeah. Rodgers is going to blank in 29, probably, on the assumption Liverpool would beat Spurs. The fixtures are definitely worse from 25 to 28 compared to Clivert's. Okay, fine, he has Ipswich, but I would rather have Southampton away, given the form Clivert's in, as opposed to the form that Rodgers and Villa are in for Ipswich at home, and then the fixture run that follows after, right? And the fact that I'll probably lose some value on Clivert if I don't make the move a week early. So I'm probably going to Clivert there. I roll in 26, I roll in 27, I roll in 28. I'll have 4 frees by the time we get to 29. And, that should be enough, right? I've already got rid of Gordon, so I have Isak, and I would have got rid of Rodgers. So I'll have 4 frees with Isak, Hall, Kanate, Gakpo, and Salah. If I used 4 frees, I would only have 1 left, but I'm going to keep Isak and Gakpo, and then, Isak and Salah, and I'll probably just sell the other 3. And even if I sell one less than that. I still have depth in my squad to company for it. So I think transfer plans looking forward look quite solid. And I like the strategy of just setting yourself up for 29 whilst maintaining some strength in the squad, knowing you can just offload later because we can carry more free transfers. Last thing, actually, I was going to move on. I think using transfers 26 to 28 is, from the way that I look at it right now, and things can change, slightly suboptimal just because I don't see too many opportunities for major upside players. And considering there's a lot of downside to getting 29 wrong with your free transfers, maybe big hits, sat on a big player, maybe you have to sell someone you have a lot of value tied up in and you want them back, I'd just be a little bit less trigger happy in that period as a result of that analysis. As it says on the slide, not only am I not excited about triple captaining Salah, I'm not even excited about the prospect of captaining him. I expressed in the match analysis section the reasons for Bournemouth away being one of the toughest fixtures you can have this season, but I will touch on that just again, just in case any of you skipped over that section, which I imagine a few of you did. They've lost 2 games there at the Vitality this season, right? One to Brighton, and to be fair, I'd say maybe a draw was a fair result there, and then one to Chelsea. And as a Chelsea fan, I think it's very fair to say that they deserve the win on that day. They were better than us, undoubtedly better than us, right? Sancho came on in the second half and definitely changed things, but I still think overall they were better than us. Missed a lot of chances, and narrowly so, right? And missed a penalty. Going there is so tough. They beat City, they beat Arsenal, they beat Spurs, they beat Forest 5-0, right? And they beat other sides, they beat basically everyone else. Not a joke to go there and win. If you do so, it's a tremendous achievement. And I don't think anyone's even scored more than 2 goals at the Vitality this season. There's just so many things I don't like about it. There's actually very little that's positive about it. Likewise, Everton, they will do everything they can to make that game so tough for Liverpool in that deeper block and make it really difficult. I expressed in the match analysis section, if you persist with Diaz, even with the rotational dynamic between him and Gakpo, I don't think that's the most effective way to slay that low block. And in general, with the profile of 8s that Liverpool have, again, not like the best low block killers. I would say Harvey Elliott's more the type, but to use him in such a physical game, probably not, because he doesn't probably drop Szoboszlai or McAllister, right? He's definitely not dropping Gravenberch. So I don't think that'll be easy. So I can just see a scenario where he goes blank in one game and then gets a goal in another. He finishes on around like 10, 11 points. And I'm just like, what was the point? If I'm really not that bullish on him doing well, what's the point? Now, on the flip side, Liverpool are the best team in the league this season, almost undoubtedly. He's the best player in the league. He's having his best season ever. And we don't have enough doubles whereby it's likely that we'll get another one in which to use it. And that is a super, super, super strong counter argument. The only thing I was considering is, one, maybe I get a bit lucky and there's another double game week in the future for whatever reason, and I can use it. Great. But if not, I really was considering just using it on someone in a single game week, which goes against my strategy, especially what I was talking about earlier in the season, so much, right? But in this particular scenario, I genuinely am open to it. I don't think the swing should be too bad. I do not envisage Salah falling twice, right? So if I give him like 15 points, right, and then I triple captain someone else, I'll probably do it in a very attractive fixture. For example, Palmer has like Leicester at home, Southampton at home. Maybe I do it for Southampton at home, and I give him 5 points, right? I'm being generous to the Salah triple captains in this state, I would say. I lose by 10 points. Not the end of the world, right? And it's on the assumption that I think this genuinely could be a better play. But I really am considering fading a chip entirely. Let's say I don't do that, and I use the assistant manager. I think the opportunities and the prospects are decent, but they're not quite as high upside ones as I would like. If there was a team right now who was lower down in the table that I had supreme confidence in to do well, I would probably use it in this game week and allow myself to maybe not have the chip utilized in a double as well. Because like I said, I'm not so bullish on doubling. Like one we've got to use the bench boost for, right? And then down on the line, the fixtures don't appear to be so great either. And who knows, maybe the table will settle, right, by game week 36 to 38, which is when we're potentially looking at using it. And the 5-team rule really isn't on offer in the way that we think. I know people say like Palace 31 to 33, but it's potentially looking like a bench boost 33 now. So with all that in mind, I really am open to using one of these chips when it doesn't fall in double game week. You could maybe go Brighton, who are better against the bigger sides, away to Forest. It's also the early kickoff, and I guess if you expect Forest to win, maybe that's good for Brighton with the early kickoff rule. That Bundy came up, of course. That attacks the 5-team rule. The week after, maybe you just target Nottingham Forest again. You go Fulham, and the week after, you hope there's something in the table which you can bet on, or you just take a risk, especially if it's gone so well for you so far, right? Why not? So that's something I'm considering. Could I use it on David Moyes? Do I think they beat Leicester? Yes. Do I think they get a result against Liverpool? No, not really. If I did, then I'd be far more inclined to use it, but I'm not so sure they do yet. I would honestly say I'm more inclined or leaning towards more at the moment, just not using the triple captainship, whether that be utilizing it in a single game week down the line, which I guess a lot of people call suboptimal, but I'm at least open to it. I'm not saying I'll definitely do it. And like I said, the counter argument's very strong, but I'm open to it. And likewise, with the assistant manager chip, I will play with it, especially if I get Potter on David Moyes doing well. The only thing is the Leicester at home game doesn't capture that 5-team rule. And I would like it for 4 games, right? Because there's so much upside if you get it right, even once or twice. Yeah, those are all the things I'm considering. That's my thoughts. At some point in the week, I'll have to choose, and there won't be so many days away from now. So, of course, I will update this and go through it again and have a deeper think. But for now, that's where my thoughts are at. The absolute last thing. Obviously, the assistant manager chip requires money. And I said that if I went Gordon to Mbeumo, I wouldn't have that money. So either I go Foden to Mbeumo to facilitate the cash to use the assistant manager chip in this case, or I just don't do Gordon to Mbeumo. Both things which I wouldn't really like to do. I'm more open to not getting Mbeumo at all. But like I said, I don't really like that. And as such, that also puts me off the assistant manager chip in this particular case. That is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I realized that my mic positioning for the chip strategy section was the old one, force a habit. So if the audio is a little bit off at times for that, I do apologize. My bad. If you enjoyed the video, however, I would appreciate if you drop a like on it. 450 likes is the target, as is 6,500 subscribers if you have not pressed the button yet, of which there are many, many, many of you who have not. I shall see you very soon for everything you need to know. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a lovely week until I see you, and goodbye.